Welcome back to the show. Really excited now to be joined by Tom Luginbill of ESPN. Thanks for the time. We appreciate it.
You bet, man. I feel off of last year of the official voice of the SMU Mustangs with as many times as we had y'all.
Well, it was a blast joining you guys, and I appreciate that.
Yeah.
SMU fans would appreciate another season like they had in 2025. They do have their work cut out for themselves. They lose a lot off of that team, but it's also a league that has seen a lot of change, and they could do it again if the chips fall their right way.
So I believe the one thing that gets glossed over when you come off of a season like they've had, unexpected, out of nowhere, appear in the conference championship game, all of the things that nobody thought was going to happen. Thought they'd be a good team and come in and be competitive, moving from Group of 5 to Power 5. But honestly, people probably didn't see that coming. So now I think the biggest challenge for Rhett Lashley and the coaching staff is how do you guard against and try and shield your team from all of this, right? Everybody's patting you on the back, telling you how good you are. You've arrived. You just won a Power 5 league. And what happens with young people is they listen to it, right? And then you listen to it, and then maybe your habits wane a little bit. Maybe all of a sudden somebody, shows up late for treatment, that misses a workout. There's just not that same hungry mindset, right? And I'm not saying that's going to happen. That's happened to a lot of teams because you're dealing with 85 young people, and in today's climate, you're doing with roster turnover, which it's hard enough to bring back the same chemistry and things of that nature from a previous team. Try doing it when there's 40 different players on the roster. So and money, right? And so there's so many factors working against I think a coaching staff coming off of a year like last year, going into a year, because you're guarding against so many things that have nothing to do with talent. And I think that's always scary. And if you come up with a way, that's why I've always appreciated the likes of a Nick Saban or a Dabo Swinney. The more success they've had, the harder it gets. And it's not easy to get young people to go out and play at their highest level when everybody's telling them how good they are all the time.
And Rhett Lashley just stopped by with us a little bit earlier, and he said, Clemson, clear class of the ACC, maybe the number one team in the nation.
Yeah.
You've got a good Louisville team. You've got Miami that's always entering with high expectations. What's your view of that top half of the league in your sense and how competitive it is?
Well, I think you're going to have good quarterback play. If you have a quarterback, you have a chance. You guys know that very well with Kevin Jennings coming back. A team like Georgia Tech, I think they've got the best team they've had under Brent Key. Haynes King's a difference maker at quarterback. Mentioned Cade Klubnik. We'll see what Tommy Castellanos does at Florida State. We've had a pretty large sample size of him at Boston College. And then you got guys, in my opinion, like Chandler Morris at Virginia. I think he's an upgrade. Gio Lopez at North Carolina battling with Max Johnson. And then the guy that doesn't get talked about enough, in my opinion, is C.J. Bailey at NC State. Had a phenomenal freshman year under very difficult circumstances. And then Carson Beck, of course, comes over to Miami from Georgia with a large sample size of success, but he's such a different quarterback than Cam Ward was. So I think the other thing, too, that I always look at is scheduling. And the schedule for SMU this year is entirely different than the one they played last year. And it's interesting because I always look at three things with schedule. Who you play, that got more difficult. When do you play them, all right? And where do you play them? Are your most difficult road games in your most hostile environments, or are they not in the most hostile environments? Are you catching a team in week 3 that all of a sudden in week 11 is an entirely different team, but you caught them at the right time? So who you play, when you play, where you play does matter. And so now you go from being the hunter, if you're SMU, to the hunted, and the schedule got more difficult.
How do you see their season panning out just from a loose expectations perspective from your side of things? They have Louisville, Miami at home.
Yep.
They also go to Clemson. And then kind of a sneaky, interesting game is they go on the road right back to Wake Forest, that side of the coast. New coaching staff. They could be totally different from week 3 to week whatever that is. So a lot of different moving parts for that schedule, but one that is, like you said, more competitive, it seems like.
Listen, I think I like the roster that they're going into these matchups with. I think offensively they may have the best tight end room in the country. All right. Got to stay healthy, right?
Yep.
Wideouts are going to be fantastic. We know what the quarterback brings. Obviously, I think losing Brashard Smith's a big dent because of all of the different things he meant, not just in the run game and the passing game, but in the return game too. Defensively, it's very difficult because it's something you teach, it's something you coach, but sometimes it's something that just happens or doesn't. But this is a team that was so good at creating turnovers and negative plays, and it's hard to duplicate that. Like I always looked at, if you remember those old Miami teams, and they, created the turnover chain.
Yeah.
Well, dude, like being plus 20 in turnover margin is phenomenal. Is that going to happen 2 years in a row? No, right? So how do you replicate that to your best of your ability? Because each and every year is different.
Cade Klubnik, what he's able to do, in his last year at Clemson, now comes in with a bigger target on his back.
Yeah.
A Heisman Trophy front runner. You add Carson Beck to this league. Miller Moss comes in at Louisville. I look at those three teams as kind of the ones that SMU, they got to go 2-1 against that group.
Yeah.
And find a way to get back to Charlotte by doing that.
Yeah, there's no question about it. And you mentioned that Miller Moss has played some pretty good football too, and Louisville might have one of their better rosters top to bottom, especially if they get Colin Lacey back. Running back Isaac Brown is a difference maker, and they took a step back on defense a little bit. But you're 100% correct. And the thing about it, and this applies to the Big 12, the SEC, the Big 10, the ACC, what have you, because of the transactional nature of the sport, you've thinned the herd, and what you've done is you've made every team more competitive with one another so that the margin of error gets thinner. So getting into one possession games, managing games, not being heavily penalized, don't turn the ball over, right? Because what ends up happening, if the playing field gets leveled out, you could be the better team but lose the game because you made more mistakes than the other team did. You've heard that old adage, most games aren't won, they're lost. And so you, if you're SMU, have to play your best against the best teams on your schedule, but then because the league's got more competitive top to bottom, you can't go out and have an off day. Like, you can't go do what SMU did against Duke last year. No. Right? That doesn't happen. It was wild. I had that one. It doesn't happen. Rhett Lashley knows it doesn't happen. And so those are the types of things and performances you got to avoid.
I'll end on this with Kevin Jennings. There's part of me that says he's not getting talked about enough because of his overall body of work.
Yeah.
But also, those last two games, for 6 quarters of them, it was tough.
Yeah.
And the national side of things probably takes a little bit more note of that versus the body of work. What do you see from Kevin Jennings and your expectations? Yeah. And is he somebody that is in that well-known but also a dark horse, Heisman type of discussion?
So it's interesting. Before I answer that question, so I was on the sideline working the Penn State SMU first-round playoff game.
Yeah.
And I will never forget that 4th and 1.
Oh, yeah.
Because if that,
talk about games lost.
Exactly. If that's a different outcome on that play, the game in its entirety is a differently played game. And so I think, obviously there's a lot of negativity that comes from that. I think he is extremely mature. I think he loves and has a passion for the game, which means his all-season work habits in leadership will continue to grow because it's important to him. I think he wants to work the footwork with more discipline, especially from within the pocket circumstances. Everybody and their brother knows what he can do when the things aren't ideal, the play breaks down, or they call a designated quarterback run. I think what he wants to do is become a little bit more disciplined with his footwork, his eyes, his feet, his timing, and that's kind of the next evolution of his progress.
Tom, thanks for stopping by with us on the show, and we appreciate all your time.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks for having me, man.
All right. Tom Luginbill, thanks for watching the show. We'll catch you guys next time.